And now we're ready to put the final touch on a brilliant work. We're ready to learn the art of inking. Your illustrations may be works of art, but they can't be reproduced by the printer unless black India ink is applied to the original pencil drawing. That means that someone has to ink over the initial penciled artwork with either a drawing pen or a paintbrush, transforming each illustration into a carefully inked final product. However, an inker is not just a person who traces a pencil drawing. The inker must be an artist himself or herself. A gifted inker can make mediocre penciling look great, but a mediocre inker can also make great penciling look dull.
Inking requires concentration. Therefore, you should make sure your posture is correct. Don't slouch over your drawing board. Sit up straight. Ruling lines with your brush is far more difficult than using a pen, but the results are usually worth it. Just hold the ruler at about a 45-degree angle and run your brush along it like this. By varying the pressure of your brush, you can make lines of any thickness. Lines ruled with a brush are not as stiff as those made with a pen. Actually, they tend to have more character.
Become equally adept at both pen and brush. The brush requires more time to master, but if you use a pen exclusively, your finished drawings may seem stiff and lifeless. Now, these examples of brushwork are called feathering. Notice how some strokes go from thin to thick. They're all done with the same brush, merely by varying the pressure you use. In case you're wondering, John is using a Winsor Newton No. 3 sable hair brush. Same brush, different effect. John is now using the side of the brush rather than the tip. This is a very helpful technique for inking hair on a character's head, for example.
Experiment with your tools. Search for different effects. Use anything imaginable to get the effect you need. Open your mind. That's what art is all about.
Here's a well-inked panel. See how the lines vary in thickness? They're heavier on the underside of the bodies, away from the light. Now this gives solidity to the figures. And look how clear the picture is, even though there are a number of figures and a wealth of little details. You see, a good inker ensures that drawings will be understandable, no matter how complicated they might be. One way to achieve this is to use heavy blacks to make the figures stand out from the background.
Here's the same panel, but it's overworked. It's too dark, and there are too many lines. When it's reduced to comic book panel size, it's going to be tough to understand. Too much texture has destroyed the basic beauty of the drawing, and it's almost impossible to read.
On the other hand, here's an example of the other extreme. The inker here didn't use enough variety in his lines. The blackened areas are too skimpy and spotty, and they have no pattern. His lines are almost all the same weight, with no feeling of thick or thin. The characters, as you can see, just seem to blend into the background. It's boringly blah. Now, it's just as bad to keep a panel too light as it is to overwork it. The secret is to know when and where to place your strong black areas. Too little or too much will ruin your drawing.
The black areas here are concentrated on just one side of the figure. This technique accomplishes two things. First, it gives a feeling of dimension. Second, it directs the reader's attention to the character's face by framing it with massive black areas. The figures here are drawn realistically. See how bold and simple the heavy black shadows are? Again, there's one bright light source illuminating one side of the body and casting the other side in deep shadow. Keep your inking simple, with just one definite light source in each panel.
Now here, the main purpose is to create a mood of fear and menace.
Look at both panels. Now concentrate on the simplified panel. The blackened areas are simple vertical or horizontal forms, thereby creating a calm, motionless scene.
The dramatic exception is the large slanting black masses on the winged gargoyle, which add a sudden feeling of shock, of impending danger. Also, look at the large vertical black designs within the fence bars. They unify the picture. Now, without them, the whole design would seem to fall apart. Here, the black designs seem to be jumping all over the place. They're creating a feeling of chaos and action, but the pattern, although it's seemingly jumpy, is really quite consistent. It rivets your eye on the action.
Now, the black areas are arranged here to create a pleasing circular movement. These two slashes across the bottom add action and unity. Here's our final example.
The light coming from the left is casting everything on the right in deep shadow. The heavy black shadow area emphasizes the feeling of a horror story. Now, just by looking at the design of the panel, you know it's no humor or romance strip.
Notice the way the black areas in the background give a feeling of realism and detail without detracting from the two important figures.
This panel is heavy, it's melodramatic, and yet it's clear. In a word, it's marvel. In summation, the penciler draws his panels in, what else? Pencil. Then they must be finished by the inker. Now it's up to the inker to decide where and how boldly to apply his black ink. The inker figures prominently in determining the mood, the design, and the clarity of each panel. Thus, when you seriously study comic book artwork, be conscious of two complementary elements, the basic pencil drawing and the inked version. See? And you thought it was going to be complicated.